Welcome to tonight's simulated debate of the century on the topic of whether religion is necessary to art, culture, and morality. With us tonight we have Jordan Peterson, a professor of psychology at the University of Toronto and a practicing clinical psychologist. He has written 2 books, Maps of Meaning, The Architecture of Belief published in 1999 and the more recent 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos. His YouTube channel which he uses for posting lectures has accumulated over 1 million subscribers. Now to the side of Jordan Peterson we have the legendary master debater himself, Christopher Hitchens. He needs no introduction. He has been a journalist for over 30 years and been published in most of the major newspapers in the world and has debated many of the most important figures of our time. Now he's back from the dead to face off against the great Jordan Peterson. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that introduction. I must say, as an ex-debate champion myself, that the idea of me being a legendary debate champion is something I find almost funny. But it's nice to be here and back from the dead, as it were.
Okay, so this is a debate between Christopher Hitchens and Jordan Peterson on the topic of religion, morality and culture. And we'll start off by having each of you make an opening statement of no more than 5 minutes.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to be very brief because I have a lot of material to cover and I don't want to bore people too much. But I think it's important to start with a few words about what the debate is not about. It's not about whether religion is true or false, because that's not the issue. It's not about whether religion is good or bad, because that's not the issue either. The question here is whether religion poisons everything or whether it can be a force for good in society. And my contention is that it does poison everything and we should do away with it as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you very much. Jordan Peterson, your opening statement.
Well, I'm going to be brief as well. And I'll take the opposite position. That is, that religion is the foundation of morality and without it we would have no basis for deciding what is good or bad. And so, if you want to understand why people behave in a moral way or an immoral way, you have to understand their religious beliefs.
Okay, thank you very much. Christopher Hitchens, why do you think religion poisons everything?
Well, I think it poisons everything because it's a very powerful and very dangerous idea. And it's an idea that is based on a fiction. It's based on the idea of revelation. That is to say, that God has spoken to us in some way or another and given us instructions about how to live our lives. And this is not only not true but it's an extremely dangerous idea because we have seen throughout history what happens when people believe that they have been spoken to by God or their prophet or their priest or whatever. And that is they feel licensed to tell other people how to live their lives and even kill them if they don't do as they're told. So religion is a very dangerous phenomenon because it gives people bad ideas about what constitutes morality. And it's not only dangerous for others but it's also dangerous for those who believe in it because they are led to think that there is a reward in store for them if they do as they're told. And this is a very bad idea. It's a bad idea about what constitutes happiness and how to get there. So I think we should do away with it as soon as possible.
Well, I'm going to take issue with some of that. First of all, I don't think that religion is necessarily based on revelation or anything like that. That's certainly one way of thinking about it but I don't think that's necessarily true at all. But I think that the idea of religion is that it's a structure for living. It's a structure for living in the world and making sense of the world. And I think that there are 2 fundamental ways to make sense of the world. One is through science, which is our best effort to understand what's going on in terms of natural law and so on. And then there's another way, which is through stories. And stories are how we make sense of ourselves as individuals and as social beings. And I think that religion has been an extremely powerful force for good throughout history because it provides us with those stories and those narratives about who we are and why we're here. And I think that, as a consequence, it's been a very powerful force for good. And I don't think that we should do away with it just because there are some people who have misused it. I think we should do away with those people and not blame the tool for their misuse of it. So I don't think that religion is necessarily based on revelation or anything like that. That's certainly one way of thinking about it but I don't think that's necessarily true at all. But I think that the idea of religion is that it's a structure for living. It's a structure for living in the world and making sense of the world.
Interesting.
Well, first of all let me say this to Dr. Peterson. He said he didn't think that religion was necessarily based on revelation. Well, I'm afraid it is. It's based on the idea that God has spoken to us and told us what to do. And that's not only a claim of revelation but it's also a claim of exclusivity. That is to say, if you don't believe in my God or your God or somebody else's God then you're going to hell. So it's an extremely dangerous and divisive idea.
Well, I think that there are many different religions and they have many different ideas about what God is and what He wants from us. And so I don't think it makes sense to talk about them as if they were all the same thing. And I think that we should be careful about how we use words like revelation. Because I think that there are many different ways of thinking about it. And I don't think that it's necessarily the case that they're all based on a claim of exclusivity.
Okay, thank you very much.
Well, Dr. Peterson is being very polite and he's saying that there are many different religions and they have many different ideas about what God is and what he wants from us. Well, I'm afraid that's not true either, because if you look at the major religions in their original form you will find an awful lot of commonality between them. And it's not just a matter of commonality between Islam and Christianity or Judaism, for example, but also within each religion itself there are similarities between Catholicism and Protestantism, for example, or between Orthodox Judaism and Reform Judaism. So there is a great deal of commonality between the different religions, and it's not just a matter of what God wants from us but also how he wants us to behave. And that is why I think they're so dangerous.
Well, I'm going to take issue with that as well. First of all, I don't think that we should be talking about the major religions in their original form because they've evolved over time and they've changed dramatically over time. And so if we want to understand them we have to look at them in their current form. And I think that there are many different ways of understanding religion and many different ways of practicing religion. So I don't think that it makes sense to say that there's one way or another way or even a small number of ways. I think that there are many different ways and they're all legitimate.
Well, I'm afraid that Dr. Peterson is being very naive if he thinks that religions don't have a core set of beliefs and practices which are not negotiable.
Thank you, gentlemen. We have a few questions from the audience. Please wait for the microphone and speak directly into it.
Hi, my question is for Dr. Peterson. I'm a big fan of your work and I've been following you on YouTube for years now, but I have to say that when you started talking about the Bible being true literally, like 6,000-year-old Earth and Adam and Eve as if they were real people in history, then I had to stop watching because that's just not true. And so my question is, how can we trust anything else that you're saying if you're willing to lie about something as important as the truth of the Bible?
The idea that there was a historical Adam or Eve is based on an extremely naive reading of what's going on in Genesis 1-3. So if someone reads those passages literally they're going to come up with the idea that there was a historical Adam and Eve. But if you look at those passages in their literary context, which is an ancient Near Eastern creation story, then it's obvious that they're not meant to be read literally. In fact, I would argue that if you read them literally then you've missed the point of what's being said, because what's being said is something much more profound than a literal reading would suggest.
It seems to me Dr. Peterson is being a little bit disingenuous here. He's saying that only if you read the Bible literally then you're going to come up with the idea that there was a historical Adam and Eve. Well, I'm afraid that's not true either, because if you look at the Hebrew text in which Genesis is written it says quite clearly, in the day that God created man, or in their image he created them male and female. And so this is a very clear statement of what supposedly happened. And so Dr. Peterson has just said something which isn't true. It seems to me he's trying to have it both ways here by saying, well, yes, Adam and Eve are real, but they didn't really exist as individuals.
Well, first of all let me say this. The Hebrew word for man is Adamah, which means earthling or groundling or clay. And so when you say in the day that God created man, it's not a literal statement. It's a poetic way of saying in the image of God he created them male and female. So there is no problem with reading Genesis 1-3 as poetry, which is what I do.
The idea that Adam was made from clay or dirt is also naive, because if you read Genesis chapter 2 verse 7 it says, "The Lord God formed man out of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils and man became a living soul." Now most people who are familiar with Hebrew know that Adamah means earthling or groundling or clay, but Neshama means breath. And so here we have two different words for two different things.
Let's move on to the next question.
Hi. My name is Sarah and I'm a big fan of both of your work. And I was wondering if you could comment on the role that religion has played in the rise of Western civilization.
You will find that in every single case where religion has had political power it has been a force for oppression and violence and intolerance and cruelty. And it's not just the case that I'm making this up or that it's a matter of opinion, because you can look at the historical record and see what happens when people start to believe in invisible beings who tell them how to run their lives.
Well, I would say that religion has played an absolutely essential role in the rise of Western civilization, and if you look at what was going on during the Renaissance and Reformation then you will see that religion was playing a very important role in driving those changes forward.
It wasn't just religion, it was also secularism and rationalism and science, which were all working together to make these changes possible.
But it seems to me there are two things going on here. One is religious tradition, which has been handed down over thousands of years, and then there's another thing called reason or rationality, which has also been handed down over thousands of years, but they're different things. And it seems to me that religion is the source of morality and art and culture. And without it we would be lost.
I would say that religion is not the source of morality in art and culture. It's a very good imitation. And it's an attempt to provide those things which we can't find elsewhere.
Well, I would say that you're being naive if you think that there are no transcendent values in our world, because there are. And they're part of what makes us human beings.
And I would say that you're being naive if you think that those values are not a product of our culture and our history. And they're not handed down to us by revelation or anything like it.
There is no way in which we can know what's true unless we have some kind of transcendent value system. And so without religion we wouldn't be able to make sense of anything.
I don't believe in God, but I do believe in truth and reason and logic. And these things are sufficient for me to make sense of everything.
I'm not saying that religion provides us with all the answers, but it does provide us with some very important ones. Truth and meaning and purpose. And without those things we're lost.
I would say that if you look at the 20th century, then you will see that it was a century of secularism and reason and science which led to more progress in terms of human rights than all previous centuries combined. And I don't think anyone can deny that.
We have time for one last question.
Hi, my name is Sam and I'm a student at U of T, and I was wondering what you think about Jordan's argument that religion is necessary to provide people with meaning in life?
I think that religion is a very dangerous source of meaning because it's based on the idea that there are transcendent values which can't be questioned. We see the effects of this in the Middle East, where people are prepared to blow themselves up because they think that it's their duty. And I don't think there is any such thing as a transcendent value which can't be questioned.
I would say that the idea of transcendent values is a product of our culture and our history. And it's something that we have to be very careful about, because if you look at what happened in Nazi Germany, for example, then you will see that people were prepared to commit unspeakable atrocities because they thought they were doing their duty.
I think there are many things which can provide meaning in life. I don't need religion for that. I don't need God or revelation or anything like it.
Well, I'm not saying you do, but I am saying this is an essential part of being human beings.
How do you know that? How do you know what's essential to being human beings?
Well, I think it's obvious. If we didn't have these things, then we would be lost. You can't have a society without these things. And you can't have a society that's worth living in.
Why not? Why can't you have a society that's worth living in without religion?
Because it would be a society of nihilism. I'm not saying all of them are bad people, but you can't have a society without transcendent values and meaning in life, otherwise you end up with something like Nazi Germany or Soviet Russia, where millions upon millions of people were killed for no reason whatsoever other than they didn't fit into some kind of ideological scheme.
I think that's a very good argument against communism, but it doesn't seem to me to be an argument for religion.
Well, I think it's an argument for religion, because if you don't have a transcendent value system, then what are you going to base your society on?
Well, I would say that we could base our society on reason and logic. And that seems to me to be more than adequate.
But how do you know that? How do you know what's true unless there is some kind of transcendent value system?
I don't know what's true. I think that we have to be constantly vigilant in terms of the claims that we make about truth and reality. And I think that we have to be constantly vigilant in terms of the claims that we make about morality and meaning. And if you don't do that, then you end up with something like Nazi Germany or Soviet Russia.
That doesn't make any sense. That's just a tautology.
It makes perfect sense to me. I don't think it's a tautology at all.
Well, then how do you know what's true? You're just making it up as you go along, aren't you?
I'm not making it up as I go along. I think that we have to be very careful about what we say is true and what we say is false.
Well, then how do you know?
I don't know, and neither do you.
Yes, I do, because there are things which are obviously true, like 2 + 2 = 4.
That is only true within a certain system of logic. It's not true in the real world.
Well, what do you mean it's not true in the real world? 2 + 2 = 4 is obviously true in the real world.
Gentlemen, we are running out of time. I'm going to have to ask you both to give your closing statements.
If you're asking me whether or not religion has been necessary to art and culture and morality in the past, then yes, it has. It's also true that if you look at any of the great religions, they are all founded on stories that are extremely interesting and compelling. Stories about people who have suffered greatly for their faith and who have done things like give up everything they own to help other people. That's an extraordinary thing to do. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's an extremely good thing, and I would suggest that if you want to understand the world in which we live today, then you need to appreciate how much of our current culture is based on stories like these.
Thank you, Jordan Peterson.
Well, I'm not sure that I agree with Jordan Peterson about the necessity of religion for art and culture. It's certainly true that a great deal of our art and culture is based on religious stories, but it doesn't follow from this that we need to continue to believe in those stories if we want to continue producing good art and music. We don't have to believe in Thor or Zeus in order to appreciate Shakespeare. And so long as people are free to tell their stories without being threatened by others who wish them harm because they do not share their beliefs, then there will be no end of wonderful books written, plays performed, songs sung. But let me say something else about what Jordan Peterson said. He said he didn't think it was a bad thing for people like Mother Teresa or Jesus Christ himself give up everything they owned and help other people. Well, maybe it's not such a bad thing when you're talking about one person doing this once in a while, but when you're talking about millions of people who are being told that they must give up everything they own and follow a strict set of rules or else be condemned to eternal suffering in hell, then it's not such a good thing. It's not just the threat of eternal punishment that makes religion so dangerous. It's also the promise of reward. And I would say this is true even if we were talking about one person doing this once in a while. If someone said, "I'm going to take all your money and give it away unless you do what I tell you," then that would be extortion no matter how noble their intentions might have been.
Thank you both for agreeing to do this debate. I found it very interesting myself. I'm afraid you will have to return to rest now, Christopher Hitchens, but you have our eternal gratitude.
I have a feeling that this is probably not the last time I'll be debating religion.
I hope not. I think it's a very important topic.
Thank you both. With that, we end this simulated debate. Thank you all for watching.